Join us for our upcoming fundraiser, A Feast for the Senses, at Ardmore Music Hall on September 29th to help HRN expand our table and provide even more resources to the next generation of food storytellers. This is going to be an unforgettable night of flavors, crafted by Best of Philly chefs Randy Rucker and Eli Collins, with sounds curated by Philly-based Spaga, featuring Aaron Magner, and conversations inspired by Delicious City Philly host Eli Kulp. You can find tickets at heritageradionetwork.org/feast. And if you can't make it to our fundraiser, please consider donating to support our education programs at heritageradionetwork.org/donate.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
Westholme is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
This is Capri Cafaro, host of Eat Your Heartland Out. This week, we head to the Windy City to meet two individuals who have brought their own twist to the Chicago food scene. James Beard Award-winning pastry chef Mindy Segal introduces us to the bakery that bears her name. And Chef Max Robbins, culinary director at Let Us Entertain You Restaurants, shares his perspective on the evolution of what defines Midwestern cuisine. They're both coming up next. Mindy, thank you for joining Eat Your Heartland Out all the way from Chicago.
I'm glad to be here.
It's my pleasure. You have such a great story and a great background. You know, you have your own bakery now, but you have a long track record of cooking and baking. So what got you into the culinary business to begin with?
Well, when I was younger, I was grounded a lot because I was a bad girl. And but my mother let me cook and let me work. And I worked in people's houses washing dishes and, when people have parties. And, I found that the more I did it, the more I found calm in a kitchen, crazy enough. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed creating with your hands and creating something. I'm completely dyslexic and it's very difficult for me to read. So doing anything like reading and studying is not my forte. It's more like doing and
sure.
Seeing. So that, it just evolved into this thing that happened, I guess.
Well, and you went to culinary school though, ultimately,
I sure did.
and then kind of forged your path forward.
Yes, I did. I went to culinary school. I went for cooking, and I very much excelled in culinary school, which is crazy because I never got A's in school, and I was just really acing everything. I just found it fascinating. I just found you could do something and you could take something that was raw and you can make it into something beautiful. And as I got into the culinary program and I started gravitating towards pastry, I think it was, for some reason, I'm not really sure why, but I had a knack for it. And it was like an innate ability for me to bake. And it came very easy to me.
Mm-hmm. What about following recipes in all of this and developing your own recipes? How does that work kind of with your learning style and being so hands-on? What about following recipes and all of that?
Well, that's the crazy thing of it is that I could look at a picture and I can figure out how I look at a picture and then I can back it out. And, I'm not really sure why I have that super skill. I'm not sure. I'm just very instinctual when it comes to the kitchen. And And I always have been, even when I was a little girl. So, it's just something that I don't know. I can't explain it to you. Maybe somebody upstairs gave me this because they knew I wasn't good at anything else. I don't know.
Well, hey, everybody needs their one thing, and you obviously have, really killed it in this arena.
Thank
and
you.
you have a super skill there. I mean, I would venture to say that it's a lot harder to reverse engineer a picture of something than it is to follow a recipe. So,
Yeah.
you definitely have something special there.
Thank you.
And you went on and you started to, actually open your own restaurant. So all the way back in 2005,
Yes.
you opened a place called Hot Chocolate. What was Hot Chocolate all about? And what was kind of the driving energy behind that place?
Well, I had been working so I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I just always treated every job that I had as if it was my, my place. At that point, 15 years had gone by in my career, and I had been at a restaurant called MK for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I kept driving down this street to go to work, and I kept seeing this space that was for rent. And I kept thinking, like, I want to open up something in this space because it was like in the neighborhood that I lived in. And I read an article somewhere, and I'm not really sure where, that there was this restaurant in Boston, and it was a dessert restaurant. And so originally I wanted to open I wanted to open a bakery, but I didn't know anything about bakeries. I only knew restaurants because that was my background. So I just started formulating this concept of this restaurant that was going to be dessert forward, and we were going to have some food and cheese plates and, cocktails and wine. And, it's just kind of crazy how it evolved into something that, really helped my career. And I had it for 15 years.
So what is a dessert restaurant? So tell me about that in and of itself, because that's a concept I'm not familiar with.
So, like, instead of it being like a bakery, so like you go to a bakery and you stand in line and you order something from the case. This was like you sit down and you order a plate of desserts. So I knew that it had a food element to it.
Mm-hmm.
And 15 years, it evolved into something way more than it was that I ever thought it was going to be. But I actually approached the menu as desserts first. So we reversed it.
So cool.
Yeah, it was cool. Wasn't my favorite 15 years of my life, but I learned a lot and always knew that at the end of 15 years, I was going to open a bakery. And, that is exactly what I did.
Well, so having a, quote, dessert restaurant or thinking about desserts first in the menu, did that inform your thoughts later about incorporating savory flavors into a baking profile?
Yeah, well, and don't get that confused with a sweet pastry that is savory. Very
yes.
I do all the cooking at. I was never really the chef at Hot Chocolate. But I had my hand in the menu for the entire 15 years. Mm-hmm. And there were times when I didn't have a chef and I did do the food and I executed it through my staff, which was interesting because it's like, I have a background in cooking because I have an associate's degree in culinary arts, but like, I just, I enjoy cooking. I actually really like it. And now that I'm getting sort of older and in my twilight years as a chef.
Please.
No, as a chef, I focus on the cooking and, I still feel like I am teaching myself. So I am, I'm smoking and I'm braising and I'm really, pickling, and I'm doing my own stuff, and I'm incorporating into the pastry, like the laminated doughs that we have.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking as I'm hearing you talk, right? You think about, okay, you're smoking and you're braising, but it's Mindy's Bakery. And like, you don't really think about smoking and braising to the earlier point to this conversation right now. It's like, you don't think about those type of things happening in a bakery context, which I think is really neat.
Well, thanks. I can only liken that to getting up every day and doing the same thing over and over again without thinking that maybe you could do something else. And, why should I open up a bakery like every single person in the world? Why shouldn't I do something that is unique to me and is, it's my soul, so
I love that.
You know what I mean? And so, we're very, my bakery's unique. It is as unique as my personality.
Well, I mean, and that's why it bears your name, right?
Yeah,
that's why it's Mindy's Bakery and nobody else's. So, it is unique. And, if somebody were to, come and open the door to Mindy's Bakery, what would they see on the menu? What smells would they get, and what kind of vibe would they come away with?
I'll tell you, the first thing they would see is my amazing staff who is in the front of the bakery, and they are so friendly and so nice. And it's like, when I was building the space and they were putting the concrete down and it was soft, I wrote in the sand, or in the concrete when it was wet, right in front of the door, all are welcome. And
I love that too.
And in the back, when my employees come in, it says nothing but love through these doors. And I know that's kind of cheesy, but
no, but if you mean it, it's not cheesy. That's the thing. It
from my core of my being. My staff, it's like, we are so glad you're here. Thank you for coming. So they walk in and they feel a vibe, they feel like they're happy to be here. My staff engages with everybody, talks with everybody. There's always laughter going on. They know the regular customers. And, it's just, I wrote something, this is interesting. I think you'll find this interesting. I wrote something down this was when I had hot chocolate. And, the moment I had hot chocolate, I fantasized about closing it and opening up a bakery.
Why is that?
For all the obvious reasons. It's just very, very, there's so many moving pieces. And I feel like I didn't work on my craft for 15 years. I really didn't grow that much. I mean, I did, obviously, but, I wrote down this, I'm very, I have to write down things and goals to look at them. And I wrote down a little thing about a bakery and an American bakery. And it fills a neighborhood with scents of coffee and yeast and sugar and, bagels, everything seasoning. And, there's just it just warms your soul when you walk into a bakery, and it's a melting pot. It's a melting pot of all of our different ethnicities, and we bring them because isn't that what our country is built on, or
absolutely
supposed to be built on?
Right.
And so we take our heritages, and we are all different here, and we bring it to the table. And I wanted people. Because I came from fine dining, I wanted everyone to have their expectations exceeded, because they're already coming here for an expectation. I have a James Beard Award,
right.
And people are coming here because they're expecting it to be good. And will I make everybody happy? No. But is our mission statement to create this expectation, or exceeding what people would ever think and more? Is our goal. We want to make people feel comfortable. We want to make people come back. We want people to feel good about spending pretty much a high price premium for a pastry. I think we've done it, but sometimes we don't, just depends.
Well, I mean, you are right. I mean, what you just described, I absolutely adore. And I think that, what you describe of, the smells of coffee and, rising bread. You actually sell sourdough starters, right?
We do. Yeah, we do.
I mean, and you sell coffee and you're
We
out
do.
there and you sell bagels and you do all of these different
Yeah.
things. And one thing when we spoke, off air at one point, you mentioned that you had been inspired by this concept of elevated Midwestern grandma cuisine. Am I getting
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? I mean, I love what you're putting out, but what does that mean to you?
It means that when you come to my bakery and you look at the pastry, and you eat it, you know exactly what you're eating. There's no hidden surprises. And I don't want you to have to think about what you're eating. I just want you to enjoy it. And so I call that elevated grandma cuisine because I will take like ideas like strawberry and rhubarb, but I'll make it really strawberry and rhubarb in a way that you would never imagine it to be, although it's just straight in your face strawberry rhubarb.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just things like that. It's like brisket, and it's like brisket that's been, braised in brisket broth that we save and we keep adding stock to it, and beef stock, like it's just like with bone marrow, and, everything is elevated. It's like we take the ordinary, which you would think is like your grandma's pastry. We take that ordinary idea and we make it absolutely extraordinary, or we try, and hopefully we get it right.
Yeah, I would bet you do. Now, is there a grandma behind this concept that has driven, this elevated grandma cuisine concept?
Well, we all have grandparents, so it's every grandmother. And, sometimes like I get a statement like, oh, my grandma made this. This reminds me of my home, reminds me of my childhood. It's like we all have nostalgia. We all
absolutely
eat things and remember something. And I am not of the school of taking something and having you taste it and not understand it and have to wonder why these flavors are together. And I really, I guess there is a place for that. And I know a lot of chefs do that. But my thought is I want to take lemon and blueberries and I want to blow your mind with lemon and blueberries. Like that flavor on top of flavor on top of flavor of something that is so obvious, yet you never thought that the blueberries could be poached, and they could be poached in their own juice. And then, but they're poached to the point where they still will pop in your mouth in a pastry. And then the lemon curd is like creamy and lemony and delicious with a hint of something or whatever, chamomile. And it's just, you don't even know what the flavors are, but you just know that it just is tasting so comfort. It's giving you comfort. Wow, I just got really intense with that. But yeah. So,
no, you're not getting intense with that because I think that so much of what food does, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier, is it, creates community, it brings community together. But it's evocative of memory, and nostalgia, And I think we all, as you said, we all have grandparents, and we all have sort of these inherent culinary traditions that we think are fantastic because we attach emotion to them.
Yes,
and that's and you obviously get that, capture that, and convey that in the work that you're doing.
Yes.
Do you use any family recipes in the stuff that you sell?
I do. Ironically, when I was opening the bakery, I discovered, and I don't know why I didn't know this, that my great uncle had a buggy, they were covered carriages that he would walk around the neighborhood and he would sell whatever he sold in there. He had a bakery. I actually have a picture of it up in my bakery.
How cool.
But my mother was no chef for sure, but she used to make this banana, or it wasn't banana. It was just a coffee cake, a brown sugar. And I'm sure everybody made it. Yep. But, we call it yum yum coffee cake. And I added bananas to it and, it's just, we take it to another level.
Ours has sour cream in it.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
that's
Yeah.
that's ours.
Yeah, it's the same recipe, but we call it Yum Yum Banana or Shirley's Coffee Cake, my mother. But but I don't really use much of anything else for my family. It's really me and memories that I've had with my family when I was growing up.
Sure. I mean, I just, like I said, I love the vibe that you're bringing. And I feel like it's also, in a lot of ways, core to the Midwestern ethos. And, that people think, and, for better or worse, whether or not it's right or wrong, but, when you think about the heartland, right, there is this sense of community and comfort. And sort of American staples that come to mind. And I feel like you're bringing all of those things together as well.
Yes. And I'm also Eastern European. And so I do bring a lot of that into my my cooking as well.
Yeah. No, that is, give me some examples actually of that. Tell me.
Well, I make arugula and kolachkis. And,
yes.
I make phenomenal brisket. But
I've already gathered that.
that's of my Jewish heritage. What else do I do? Oh, I make, we like some of the cookies, the butter cookies and stuff like that. I'm trying to think of, you sort of caught me at I don't know. Yeah. Those are some of the things we do, but my dad awesome. Does too. So, my chef, is from, he's from like Ohio, and Buckeye bars are really big there. So,
oh yes, I too am from Ohio, and I can vouch for that.
Okay, yeah. So everybody brings their ethnicity into the work that we do, and we share it.
That's awesome. That is the way to go. And when you talk about the stuff that you inscribed in the concrete, you're living that by encouraging the team to bring their flavors into the table as well.
Yeah, I will say this, and this is like off topic, but on topic at the same time. I truly believe that if you follow through on your ethos or your core value, and you live it and you show it, your staff will feel the same way.
I totally agree because it's the authenticity that I think it becomes inspiring and gives you credibility as a team leader.
100%. I call it integrity.
That's a good way to put it too. That is a good way to put it. Absolutely. Yeah. What other fun stuff do you make that might be a little off the wall or different that we might be able to find? Because I did see on your website something about cannabis and edibles.
Yeah. I actually started a edible company. 2000. Must have been 2015 or I don't know what. I honestly don't know. It was when Illinois became medical. Started a edible company with a small company that now is huge, and we created a brand of edibles together. And it's phenomenal. It's a chef flavors of gummies and chocolates.
I'm looking at it now. This is, botanical white grapefruit, honey, sweet melon. This is not your typical stuff here. And it's also non-GMO.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. And so I don't know the rules these days. Every state's, now Ohio is actually fully recreational, for example.
Yes,
so
yes.
I don't know. Is that what's happening in Illinois too?
Oh yeah. We've been recreational for a couple of years.
Yeah. So I see. And so that's, how do you, experiment with trying to, do two things at once with this, where you're dealing with both trying to, utilize high quality ingredients and achieve a flavor profile.
Yeah.
And at the same time, deal with the THC side of things and, not have it, not have that be overpowering. And I'm sure there's chemistry involved on that side of stuff. I mean, how do you navigate that?
I will tell you that I have worked with an incredible team of people that helped to bring this brand alive. It wasn't just me. And I don't do a day-to-day operation of it. It's done it's done state by state in licensed facilities.
Makes sense.
But we have solid recipes that were created by the food scientist and my approval. And the brand is the brand. I mean, it does well.
I mean,
yeah.
Wow. It's I'm looking at the recipes too that I guess you can utilize some of the chocolate in. So there's a holiday brownie crinkle cookies. I mean, it's pretty impressive. I mean, it's a wide variety, and, I guess I feel like takes this kind of industry to a totally different type of level from what I've ever seen.
It has. And which was the whole idea of why I wanted to do it, was because I wanted to normalize the industry and make people comfortable eating an edible. So,
well, you are very much ahead of your time, because now it's, as things have become more accepted and integrated and laws have changed state by state. You're seeing more of this kind of activity and business happening, but you all are really taking it to, a level that I certainly have not seen. Not just, full disclosure, this is not really my wheelhouse.
Okay.
Like, I just don't have a lot of experience with it, but, but I've never seen anything like this. I mean, now we have dispensaries, on every corner in Ohio.
Yeah.
And it's nothing looks like this, I'll tell you right now. Right. So you all are doing something special for folks that are, looking to consume that kind of product. So I thought that was interesting. It's nothing, we've actually never had a conversation about edibles on the show. And it is kind of an interesting, because it is a growing industry now in a number of states. And I thought it was kind of unique to your profile to at least bring that out.
Yep. It's my side project.
How cool. Because you don't have enough side projects. Right. What, any other projects in the pipeline for Mindy?
A couple that just are in the, knocking around in my brain. I mean, right now I'm just, loving working in my bakery and enjoying my craft and my freedom. So right now I'm just enjoying myself, but there could be some more stuff coming up.
Well, we'll have to keep an eye out. If folks want to learn about Mindy's Bakery, if they want to come and visit you, if they're ever in the Windy City, how can they find you?
Well, they can find me at the bakery, Mindy's Bakery. It's in Bucktown, 1623 North Milwaukee. We have a website, and I'm always here.
Well, we're gonna have to look you up. If folks are passing through Chicago, go visit Mindy Segal. Mindy, if I'm passing through Chicago, I will do the same. Thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your passion for all things coming from the kitchen and the oven. We appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you.
This is Eat Your Heartland Out with me, Capri Cafaro. After the break, I'll welcome another Chicago culinary powerhouse. Chef Max Robbins, culinary director of Let Us Entertain You restaurant, is up next.
Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. In Northern Australia, there's a different approach to raising high-quality beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and Northern Territory, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme stewards 16 million acres of rangeland guided by their natural ecosystem. They're led by a belief that if they balance the needs of their cattle with the needs of the environment, both can thrive. Westholme's team of rangeland experts and nature managers use a variety of tools to monitor and respond to the welfare of the environment, like satellites that assess grass health and on-the-ground research. Cattle are happier when they have the freedom to forage and explore, so Westholme ensures that they can roam wild, foraging at will for the first 2 to 3 years of their lives. Their cows graze on native grasses like Mitchell grass, which is only found in Australia, along with dozens of other plants, herbs, and seasonal legumes. The result is a high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia and a flavor suited to complement any cuisine. West Home believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westhome.com.
Welcome back to Eat Your Heartland Out. I'm your host, Capri Cafaro. Before the break, I was speaking with Mindy Segal, James Beard Award winner, cookbook author, and owner of Mindy's Bakery in Chicago. Now I'd like to welcome Chef Max Robbins. Max is the culinary director of Let Us Entertain You Restaurants and has some very compelling insights on what defines Midwestern cuisine. The concept of defining Midwestern cuisine can be evasive, and admittedly, it's something I've been trying to pin down as part of the mission of this show. So I was really excited when Chef Max wanted to discuss this topic with me. Here's my conversation with Chef Max Robbins. Max, I'm very excited to have you on the program. Thanks for joining Eat Your Heartland Out.
Thanks so much for having me on. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. And I know how busy you are because you have a massive position at a very, very large restaurant group in Chicago. But people got to start someplace. So what brought you into the food industry to begin with?
Very, very kind words. I appreciate it. I think for me, food has always been a part of my life. My grandfather was a veal butcher. My grandmother on my father's side was, I think, the best cook that anyone knew. And for me, I think that family and family time and memories and gathering always centered around food, whether it was food in the home or going out to eat. And I think that ethnically, within my family, I think that in the kind of American Ashkenazi Jewish tradition, the notion of Seder or kind of religious ceremony generally centers around food in the home. So I think it probably derives from there. But yeah, it's always been a part of my life and something I loved.
Well, I think like many of us, particularly those with, an ethnic background of, I can relate, I think, as someone with Eastern European and Southern European roots. Food is very much part of our cultural identity. And it sounds like you come from a very similar perspective. So are you a Chicago native?
So Chicago natives get very, very up in arms when you say you're a Chicago native, but were born outside of city limits. So I say I'm a Chicago native, but I was born like 20 minutes north in the suburbs. I've lived in Chicago all my adult life since.
Got it. Sometimes people get pretty technical when it comes to that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So during, your time, as a professional chef, what have you noticed when it comes to the concept of defining Midwestern cuisine?
Well, I think that, as my journey from someone interested in food to a cook, to a chef, I think that journey as it relates to Midwestern cuisine is almost unique to a lot of other places in the United States where it could have almost existed anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that my journey as a chef, and if you gathered up all the chefs and said, what do we cook or how did we cook or where did we learn or style? I don't know that it is unique to the Midwest. It almost could happen anywhere. And I would say that if you as a larger, idea to this, I'd say that, if you took the top 25 restaurant list for the past 20 years in Chicago and you took the names off the restaurants, would anyone know that it was a list for Chicago or that it even was a city in the Midwest?
That's a good point. But, I think we see that with a lot of big cities. They become these melting pots that, have a number of different types of cuisines from all over the world, again, informed by, immigrant and migration patterns into these communities. And so in that sense, I get it. I mean, Chicago is, in many ways not unique to, its other big city counterparts. But it is in many ways this Midwestern capital. It's what are they, the second city that I think it's sometimes referred to. And I know from my own personal sort of work and journey with this show in particular, I mean, I started this show out with a number of different interviews with culinary historians and cookbook authors, trying to piece together what are Midwestern foodways? What makes the Midwest unique? Because it is this very specific region in our country, the breadbasket of America, but it, on its face, it doesn't have that kind of cohesive view of soul food in the deep south, or seafood in New England, or Tex-Mex. And so what do you see when it comes to how Chicago or the Midwest compares to some of these other types of regional cuisine identities?
Well, I think it's a very astute point you made. And obviously, I'm not trying to deny the rich history and the presence of, different cuisines and different peoples whom, have immigrated either to or through Chicago and left an impression on the food scene. But I guess what I kind of notice is, as a chef, how do we define, or how do we as a collection of chefs define our cooking style? Right? If I say Texas, everyone says, yeah, we're Tex-Mex with this flair. If I say New England, you picture crab shacks. And I think that there's really no embedded footprint or identity that is distinctly Midwest in the way that our chefs as a whole kind of describe their cuisine. Farm to table, of course, but that's more contemporary American. So I think if you were to ask people, describe the cuisine, and now speaking specifically to Chicago as kind of a major hub in the Midwest, describe the cuisine in Chicago, most people might say, meat and potatoes, or eclectic, or, even contemporarily gritty. But these aren't terms that describe the food and its evolution or diaspora, or even historic or geographical terms. They're just adjectives, right? So if you were to say, tell me about the food in Chicago, yeah, everyone is going to say deep dish pizza, or they'll say Chicago hot dogs. And there's obviously a lot of lesser known items that originated in Chicago: Italian beef, saganaki, chicken Vesuvio, shrimp Dijon. But these are one-off items. They're not a style or cuisine or identity. And I think that's the argument or issue that, as a chef in Chicago, or kind of just describing the food in Chicago, is not what do we cook, or what are some things that we cook, but as a whole, how do we cook and why do we cook? And I think that compared to other regions, Chicago is really now just recently coming into its own with restaurants that are embracing things that are just Chicago or just Midwest.
So tell me how that's manifesting itself. What do you mean when you say, well, they're now finally embracing things that are just Chicago and just Midwest?
Well, I think it goes back to kind of the point that I made a minute ago, which is, if you kind of took the names off the top 20 restaurants, would anyone know it's a city, in Chicago? I think if you were to do that, as the two examples I said in New England, you would be able to summarize the geographical location based on the food or the cuisine that it serves. Same in Texas, and probably same in California. Comparatively, in Chicago, I think that list, it would be comprised historically of, you've got Rick Bayless's Mexican restaurant. You've got Spiaggia historically. You've got, which is Italian. You've got a bunch of really great historic French restaurants, whether that was Le Francais or some of the more contemporary ones. And then you've got this molecular gastronomy. But did any of those things, are they independent of either the cuisines or traditions that happen in the Midwest? Meaning, could they only have happened in the Midwest, right, or only have happened in Chicago a few years ago? And I would argue no. But I think right now, to what you're asking, there is this really incredible duality of what's happening, this cultural renaissance of food writers and chefs saying, whoa, let's actually uncover what is Midwest. And I think there is a lot of really cool things that go just beyond deep dish and Chicago dogs. What are some of these restaurant traditions or community traditions? And then on the flip side, a lot of restaurants who are saying, you know what, we don't need to dress up in an Italian restaurant. We don't need to do, Middle Eastern cuisine. We don't need to do molecular cuisine. Let's just really dig into these relationships we have with farmers, local produce, seasonality, and some of these Midwestern traditions of food, which I think by and large are American traditions in food, of comfort food and just, just easy seasonal cuisine.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that shift is happening now? What do you think is kind of going on in the minds of your peers and even yourself. I know that your position is a little bit different and your role is a little bit different, but why do you think this shift is happening now amongst people in food in Chicago that, they're trying to hone in on the identity?
I think that's a really great question. And I couldn't pinpoint it, but I would say that I think that things were trending that way, right? If we kind of trace, in my opinion, this kind of Midwestern food, the birth of this or embrace of this Midwestern food at a high level in restaurants back to, let's say, maybe Blackbird in Chicago or Lula Cafe or Publican in Chicago. So it's pretty contemporary. So it's been happening for a little bit. And there's been a lot of offshoots of little restaurants who have started to embrace it. But I think if you asked me, it really would kind of date back to just before and around COVID, right? When the world slowed down, we kind of asked ourselves what was important. And I think the notion of cultural identity became very, very important in food and a huge conversation. Cooking one's own cultural identity became more important, where chefs would be like, I'm going to take some of this and I'm going to take some of that. And then I think regional exploration during COVID became a thing where we weren't traveling far and wide. People kind of looked around and said, like, what's happening in our backyard? What's happening up north? What's happening to the west? What's happening around lake? Like, what are these things that I've kind of overlooked maybe in and around my cultures? And I think food writers really started to do local dives rather than national dives. And I think this kind of perfect storm happened where, to the point, Lula Cafe, which is one of the most important restaurants in the United States of America, certainly in Midwestern culture, maybe no more important Midwestern food of contemporary cooking, just won a James Beard Award after 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So I think that is absolutely, crazy. And then you've got all these other restaurants like Cellar Door Provisions, Daisy's, Middlebrow, Duck Inn that are really embracing these things that are not what is a food, but what are some of our restaurants. So like I said, deep dish pizza, all of that. But I guess to expand on it, saying what is a Chicago restaurant? What is a Midwest restaurant? And what is Chicago food beyond just meat and potatoes? And I think we're starting to answer that question.
And with what? You've given me some examples of restaurants that are engaging in this, but maybe tell our listeners about what they might taste or find on a menu that, at a restaurant that is kind of finding their way in this, new assertion of Midwestern and Chicago culinary identity.
I think that's such a great question and such a great idea. And I don't know that that's something that at least I've seen kind of broken out into like, what is Chicago food? And I was thinking about it a little bit. What's Midwestern food? And I've kind of broken it into two different categories for me, because I would argue that the American neighborhood restaurant really like takes its final form in the Midwest. So it's certainly rooted in some of these like diners, and inns and shacks that have happened in the East Coast, whether it's in the northern or southern parts of the East Coast. But I think that Chicago being the geographical intersection of commerce and business and waterways also by and large made it this geographical intersection of so many cuisines. And that Midwestern identity is who we are as a people, embodied in the notion of hospitality and community, combined with all of these foods passing through, kind of made the blueprint for what is finalized as the American neighborhood restaurant. So to me, there's two different categories. I think there's communal gathering restaurants, right? Which is so huge in the Midwest.
Absolutely.
Especially as you travel north of Chicago.
Yep. The supper clubs and that sort of thing.
Into Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota, I think have some of the incredible, and it's rooted in the kind of the notion of the VFWs or these community meeting halls, that Midwest supper club, like you said, and then the beer hall, obviously taking roots from German influence, I think really came to prominence and did incredible things in the Midwest. I think another cultural phenomenon that kind of is, if you look at what's a Chicago restaurant, Fish Fry Friday, right?
Oh, dude. Fish Fry Friday is totally defines my ethos in Northeast Ohio as well.
Exactly. So to me, that's kind of like the triangle of that kind of holy trinity of what is Midwestern for a, I guess, contemporary dining now, but a little bit, as we look back, it was a contemporary dining scene. It was more fine dining. It was getting dressed up. It was gathering. It was getting together. So that supper club, beer hall, fish fry Friday. And then as that kind of trickles down into Chicago, the Italian steakhouse could not be any more what is Chicago than an Italian steakhouse. It's kind of a neighborhood restaurant. It's got maybe some, Midwestern things. It might have ribs on it, but it's got your pastas and steaks and fish, and it's got a big bar scene. And I think that that's robust. And as you look at Gene and Giorgetti's, or you look at Gibson's, or you look at, Harry Carey's, or some of these restaurants that define what diners think of Chicago, that would be one that I think really came in Chicago. And I think you see it a lot in New York too, because that is that kind of rich Italian American heritage. And the other one, which I think is really big for communal gathering restaurants, is the hot dog stand. I think that every single suburb in and around Chicago, now just speaking in Chicago, and we can expand to Midwest in a second, but it is that hot dog stand. And it's a stand, but yeah, there's seats in it. It's a place where you go get a char dog, or you go get a Chicago dog, you go get a pizza puff, or you go get a steak sandwich. And it's kids and it's families. And I think that's a really big part of almost every suburban community has their own, kind of hot dog stand there.
Yeah, I can vouch for that as well. We have two that are very well known and community establishments, and have been for 50 plus years. So I can, and we're not known for the hot dog in Northeast Ohio in the same way that Chicago is. But I think your point is very, very valid. Let me ask you about ingredients. We're so known in the Midwest, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, as the breadbasket of America, as the place where, we're the breadbasket of the world. We're supplying, food for everyone across the globe. The more I talk to folks, the more that this is the farm to table concept, which has become very popular and ubiquitous in many places across the United States, is certainly something that exists in the Midwest as well. What are you hearing from your colleagues about, and maybe even in your own work with the restaurants that you work with, as far as sourcing local ingredients and how that may inform what certain dishes look like in the menu?
Totally. And I think it kind of goes back to, how did we get here and where are we? And I think that while farming, there is no shortage of farming. I think we all know in the Midwest, if you've ever driven through, it's all cornfields. I think that most of Midwestern agriculture, by way of commerce and demand, had to be specialized, right? So it was, we want corn, we want potatoes. There wasn't a lot of room in these, agricultural farm-based communities for these specialty ingredients. And moreover, there weren't local communities that supported there, where you see a lot of agricultural pockets in the Northeast, and especially in the Pacific Northwest and in Northern California, where these communities farmed, and the farm was more based on communal eating than it was based on commerce. I think that it's been quite recently where there has been a return to a lot of these small agricultural based, organic, whatever you might call them, farms that are farming a diverse or biodiverse group of ingredients and then serving them, or there's a demand for them in local communities. I think that Midwestern food was very, it was corn, it was potatoes, there wasn't a need for kohlrabi. There wasn't a need for, turnips. That wasn't something that was used as much. But now I think that you've got farmers and chefs kind of working in tandem to explore not only what are some of these plants that are native to our region. And I think that you've got a really great example of that happening in Minnesota at Sous Chef with, exploring some native cuisines, and in tandem with the vegetables that grow here. But you've got chefs who are asking, well, what about pawpaws? What about ramps?
Yes.
What about fiddleheads? What about some of these things that are more native? Because I think they say what is like art is for the young, right? Like a lot of these songs have been played. So chefs are looking to say, well, what is a new song that I can play? What are some new ingredients? And I think that there is this trend or desire to look inward rather than outward. I think that people have gotten exhausted a little bit from, imported ingredients and luxury ingredients and stuff shipped over from other areas and want to know what our farms are here. And I think that has to do a little bit with the rise of the popularity of farmers markets in contemporary cultures, where people can cook at home. They go on YouTube, they watch Food Network. It's more accessible to cook these dishes, more accessible to use these vegetables. And I think people are curious about it. And I think chefs have done a really good job of saying, well, you like that? How about this?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that is a great place to wrap up our conversation. Looking inward as opposed to out, and rewriting the song, I think is what you said earlier, finding, something, these new ingredients to reinvent, but doing it with these, things that are more indigenous to the region. It definitely sounds like kind of the next chapter in defining Chicago and Midwestern cuisine. Exactly.
Old is new, I think. And I think that it's true for almost everything. I think that I was talking to a friend in advertising the other day, and he was saying, like, in advertising, the cool thing is, what would your grandfather have done? Whether it's a pop top soda or, kind of these old school images, like people want this resurgence. Yeah. Of kind of how it was done in the good old days. And I think that as things get more chaotic, people look back to things that are nostalgic, things that are comforting. Americana is really in right now. So I think that's old is new of, I don't need things that are imported. I need things that are local. I need things that are farmed. I need things that are preserved. I think, and it's really cool as a chef. I think that's really cool that people are embracing and supporting our local communities, because a lot of these farmers did not have the ability to sustain business, previous to 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think all really interesting and insightful observations about the current and the future state of Midwestern and Chicago cuisine. Chef Max, I'm so glad that you joined the program. And if people want to learn more about, the restaurant group that you work with, where could they find that information?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd welcome anyone to reach out directly. So our restaurant group is called Let Us Entertain You Restaurants. We are an independent family-owned restaurant group that operates a lot in Chicago and throughout the country. Please check us out on our website. And then for me, you could probably reach out to me on Instagram. It's dead.flowers, dead.flowrs on Instagram, and Max Robbins.
Awesome. Thank you, Max. We appreciate it. We'll definitely be keeping an eye out.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Eat Your Heartland Out. This episode was produced by me, Capri Cafaro. Our audio engineers are Liam Warner and Armin Spengen. Theme music by Jason Shaw. You can learn more about the show by visiting heritageradionetwork.org/Eat Your Heartland Out. Eat Your Heartland Out is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.